Good morning, everybody. My name is Luisa Cabria from PQE, and today I will speak about the new medical device regulation, and I will provide you some information about how this new regulation impacts on the company quality management system and how it may impact on your quality and regulatory activities. The good news is that I have heard what my colleague Carol said during her presentation, and more are the concepts are exactly the same. So the good news is that if you undertake activities to align with the new Mexican norm, maybe you will also be in compliance with the European regulation, because many requirements are relevant for both the regulation. So that if you comply with the Mexican norm, maybe you comply with the European requirement and you can sell your product in the European countries. I remind you that for Europe, new regulations for medical device and in vitro diagnostics devices have been published in 2017. This on the official journal of the European Europe. You know that in Europe we distinguish between the two categories of devices, medical devices and in vitro diagnostics devices. So we have two regulations, one for each category, but the two regulations are very, very similar. The requirements are most the same for both the category, with maybe some specific difference on some aspect, but I think that is more or less the same. So I will focus on the first part of this regulation, that is the part 2017-745, that is applicable for medical devices. So why this new regulation? First of all, it has been published in order to set a higher quality and safer level of standards for the medical devices in order to protect the health of the patients. So the most important purpose of this regulation is the protection of the patient health. Then there are other reasons behind this new regulation. One is the alignment for the significant change in the technological environment in this year. So there were aspects related to the new technology that were not covered by the previous directive 93/42. And then this new regulation taking care of this progress in the technology. Then there is also in alignment with other regulations, and one of the purposes, I am not sure it is fulfilled, is to facilitate and to leverage the distribution of products within the European community, the European Union. Maybe this regulation, due to the higher level, to the stricter requirement, maybe somebody could not agree to the fact that it facilitates the circulation. But anyhow, it was considered one of the purposes of the issuance of the new regulation. I would like to underline an important concept. That is the difference between the regulation and the directive. Before in Europe, we had directives. These directives were not legally binding. That means that the member state of the European Union had to issue local laws to implement, to get the requirement and to implement the requirement within each single country, each single member state. Now the regulation is legally binding. That means that it's law. There is no need to a local law, country by country, to implement the requirement. It's already a law. That means that a product to be distributed within the European Union shall comply with the requirement of this regulation. Otherwise, each member state can refuse to have the product within its market, because this is the law for Europe. What are the key changes introduced by the regulation? So here we can you can see a summary of the changes, and then I can provide you some details about the most important topic that are highlighted by the new regulation. For instance, the first one is the expansion of the scope. Expansions both in terms of stakeholders that are subject to this requirement, and also expansions in terms of product, because this regulation states that it is applicable not only to medical devices, standard medical device, but also to products not having a medical intent. An example is the laser that are used for aesthetical purposes and not for medical purposes. But if you think about them, the user is exposed to the same risk of the laser which is used for medical purposes. This is the reason why it should be compliant with the same safety and performance requirement than a device that is used for medical purposes. So in this case, in this sense, the scope is expanded. Then another important point is the introduction of the common specification that provide requirements for very specific category of devices, and the medical device coordination group document. What are these documents? These documents are guidances that are issued by this medical device coordination group established by the European Commission to provide specific guidances how to interpret and how to implement the requirement of the regulation where they are not clear. They are very useful because they are also providing some examples. I will show you more before. Then there is the reference to the medical device, to the person responsible for regulatory compliance, who is somebody similar to the responsable sanitarios for that my colleague spoke about. There are stricter requirements for economic operators. I will tell you in a few seconds what does it mean, who is an economic operator. There are specific requirements for manufacturer and device registration within the European Union. The implementation of a unique device identification system called UDI, very similar to the one that is already in force for the United States. The reclassification of devices. We have new rules for the classification of devices. Classification, I mean, based on risk. We will see stricter rules on clinical evidence. So they need to have clinical data, to collect clinical data before putting a device on the market. Enhanced requirement for the post-market oversight, including vigilance for the reporting of the incident, and other minor changes. But I just wanted to highlight what's the highest impact on the company requirement. So I told you something, I mentioned the expanded scope in terms of operators, of stakeholders. So the important concept is that the requirement of the regulation not only applies to the manufacturer, but they apply to all the economic operators, including importers, distributors, and the European representatives. You know that a manufacturer who is based outside of the European Union is required to have a European representative. So the European Commission requires that there is a reference person based in Europe that represents the manufacturer. And this this entity, this legal person, is subjected to the requirement of this regulation. That we have importer and distributors, who are the companies that take care of importing the product within Europe and distributing the product within Europe. Importer and distributor, it can be the same entity. There is no need to have two separate entities to have the importers and the distributor. In some cases, it's the same person, the same company, and this is okay. And also may coincide with the European representative. So what's important is that there is at least one of these three entities within Europe in order to be able to sell the product in Europe. And I will show you which are the specific requirements for each of these economic operators. Then in the MDR, there are also requirements for the European Commission itself, for the notified bodies, and for the EU member states. But we will not focus on them because we are not directly interested in this moment on the requirement of that. I mentioned you the Medical Device Coordination Group. The Medical Device Coordination Group is a working group established by the European Commission to issue this guideline to help the companies to interpret and to implement the requirement of the regulation. As of today, we have more than 100 guidance documents for different subjects, such as the classification of borderline products. Borderline products are those medical devices that also are based on medicinal substances that are belonging to the pharmaceutical part. So we have, for instance, documents for specific new technologies, for, I don't know, the implementation of UDI. We have many operative documents or other guidance. So you can find the list of this guidance document at the web page of the European Commission. And here I am providing to you the link where you can find this document. If you are interested in selling the product in the European market, and of course you need to comply, to demonstrate compliance with this new requirement, I would suggest to make use of these guidances, because they are really useful to correctly interpret and implement the requirement of the regulation. Which are the economic operators? I already explained you. They are the manufacturers, they are authorized representative, the importer, distributors, but also companies that are assembling medical device regulation, medical device single parts already CE marked into procedure, what is called a procedure pack. What is a procedure pack? Is a kit of medical devices that already bear the CE mark, and they are put together into a single package. This specific aspect is described in the Article 22 of the regulation. So companies that are taking care of this kind of activities are subject to the requirement of this regulation. The most important article of the regulation relevant for the manufacturer is Article 10. Article 10 is listing the obligation for the manufacturer. When you would like to perform the gap analysis, to evaluate the gap between your quality management system and the requirement of this regulation, you can take as a reference this article, because it's very detailed and lists the obligation. If you can see that these obligations are very similar with what Carol told you in her previous presentation concerning the Mexican law, because maybe there is a difference in the language, a difference in the terminology, in the wording, but you will see a certain coincidence between the two. So the manufacturer shall be able to demonstrate that the device has been designed and manufactured in according with the requirement of this regulation. And this is specifically on the product. Then the manufacturer shall have a clinical evaluation process and a post-market clinical follow-up process in order to confirm what said before. After the marketing of the product, the manufacturer shall have a process in place to confirm that the device was actually developed and manufactured according to the requirement of this regulation. Of course, the manufacturer shall maintain technical documentation. Based on this technical documentation, the manufacturer shall issue a declaration of conformity for that specific device, and based on this declaration of conformity and on the assessment of conformity done with the support of the notified body, can affix the CE mark on the labeling of the product, and only having this put the CE mark on the labeling, the product can be sold in Europe. You cannot sell in Europe any product without the CE mark. And the CE mark means that the product is in compliance with the requirement of this regulation. Another obligation is to have implemented the unique device identification system. You shall have a quality management system in place. For Europe, the requirement for the quality management system are posed by the ISO 13485, which I have seen is not so different from the norm, the Mexican norm. So anyhow, you need to have this quality management system. There is no, I have heard before the question about the language. There is no specific requirement for Europe about the language of the quality management system. So if it is in Spanish, it is acceptable for Europe to have it in Spanish, since the procedure can be accepted. If you need also the English, my personal suggestion is to have a bilingual documents where it's needed. So the technical, I already mentioned the technical documentation. The technical documentation for the product shall be maintained for at least 10 years for all the devices and 15 years for implantable devices. So your quality management system procedure for document control shall explicitly mention this requirement of the regulation. There is the need to have a post-market surveillance system. The post-market surveillance system is includes the complaint handling, the complaint management, and all the media that you can use to gather feedback from the field about the safety and performance of your product. You need to have a system and a process in place. That means a procedure, an established procedure for the reporting of the incident, for the serious incident, as per the requirement of this regulation. And the last one, but it's not the least, it's the requirement to have sufficient financial coverage. During the audit, sometimes in my experience, a company are telling me, oh, I can't do this because I do not have resources. So this is not acceptable, because the requirement is to have the resources to do everything is necessary to have the product in compliance. So the financial coverage is one of the requirements. This was the obligation. These are the obligations for the manufacturer. Which are the obligations for the other economical operators, other than manufacturers, such as distribution, etc. So anybody can put a product on the market without having the CE mark and without being able to demonstrate that the product is in compliance with the requirement of the regulation. It's understood that an importer, that a European importer that imports product manufactured outside of Europe, such as from Mexico, for instance, will not conduct test or incoming inspection to check it complies with the regulation. But this will be based on the documentation. So the CE mark and the manufacturer declaration of conformity will be enough for the importer to have evidence that the product is in compliance with the regulation. If you have an importer, a distributor in Europe, he may ask you the declaration of conformity, and he has all the right to ask this, because it's his responsibility to check that he is distributing products that are in compliance with the regulation. But he will never test the product. He will base on your certificate, your declaration of conformity. And in case of non-compliant devices, the distributor will be obliged to cooperate with you for the management of this non-conforming product. For instance, to cooperate with you for the retrieval, for the recall, or whatever is needed to fix the problem with the product. And for this, he shall guarantee he has a system to maintain traceability of the distributed product, and he shall have a procedure in place to be able to manage the complaint, the recall, the withdrawal, etc. It's not mandatory the distributor or the importer has a complete quality management system, but he shall have at least procedures to manage this specific activity. What I recommend is to have quality agreement in place with your importers or distributor or European representative, because the notified body will not check or inspect this entity, but it will ask you to demonstrate that the product is distributed within the European Union in accordance with the requirement. So how you can ensure this? Through the quality management, through the quality agreement with these entities that I strongly recommend, and hopefully also through your auditing system, or not necessarily a physical and on-site audit, but at least a postal audit, an audit or an audit from remote, to be able to demonstrate to your competent authorities, to the notified body, etc., for your license to sell in Europe, that you have the supply chain under control. One important requirement I told you at the beginning in the list of the obligations is to have a person responsible for regulatory compliance. This person shall be nominated by the management of the company. So there is the need to have an appointment letter to this person who has similar duties than the responsabilis sanitarios. Is a person who has the responsibility, to ensure that the product is released in accordance with the requirement of this regulation. This does not mean that this person shall personally release all the batch, but he shall be able to demonstrate that he has the oversight of the release process. For instance, he can audit the release process. Of course. Yes, yes. It's not a specific professional degree in the sense like in the pharmaceutical world, where you have the qualified person that needs to have a pharmaceutical degree. In this case, the person shall have a technical degree in line with the kind of project or product. So if the company is manufacturing electronic devices, this shall be an electronic engineer, for instance. So it's a degree in the same field of the product, or at least this person shall have 4 years of experience in the same position. In the regulation, you can find the details about the requirement of this person. Another important thing is that within the organization, you may have more than one person's responsible for the regulatory compliance. So maybe you can have one which is responsible for the quality aspect, another one which is responsible for the regulatory aspect, another one which is responsible for the clinical. There is no limit. What's important is that in the job description of these persons is clearly defined which are the responsibility, and they are aware these persons are responsible. If there are this appointment letter, it's also important that the appointment letter is signed by the company management, but also by the person for acceptance of the responsibility. And this appointment letter shall be in consistency with the job description of the person. Oh, sorry, I was too fast. The regulation also is speaking about the new UTAMED database, which is a database that is established in order to give the possibility to register the product, to register the manufacturers, to register all the economic operator. As of today, this database is not fully operative, but some parts are operative, so some registration can already be done through this UDAM database. Then I mentioned you the UDI system. The UDI system is the new way to trace the product, to facilitate the tracing of the product within the supply chain. What is the UDI? Is a code. The UDI code is a code that can be both in barcode or QR code that shall be displayed on the packaging of the product. In some cases, where it's possible, on the product itself, then on the single packaging, on the multiple packaging, and on the sales packaging of the product. Which are the information included in this UDI? UDI is made of 3 parts. A basic UDI that identifies the family of the product. That means a group of products having the same intended use and maybe that are covered by the same CE mark and by the same technical file. Then you have the UDI-DI. The UDI-DI identifies the model, is exactly the same that your SKU, for instance. Then you have the UDI-PI. The UDI-PI is the variable part of the code with the production information. That means the batch number or the serial number, depending on the method you use to trace your product, the manufacturing date, or the expiration date. So you have these 3 components. Basic UDI for the family, UDI-DI for the model, and UDI-PI for the dynamic production information. So this is exactly the definition I give you, the basic, the UDI-DI, and the UDI-PI. How you can get this UDI number? You need to buy, sorry, from a provider. Here you can see few examples of approved supplier for this kind of code. It's the GS1, it can be SIBG, or etc. So it's just some example. You can buy packages of UDI 100, 1000, depending on the number of products that you need to label with this UDI. So this provider will give you just the UDI-DI, will never give you the UDI-PI. You will have to implement a system in order to generate the UDI-PI according to your production information. Then let's take a look to the classification and to the conformity assessment procedure. The classification for Europe is based exactly as for Mexico, is based on the level of risk posed by the usage of the device. In the previous directive, we had 18 rules for the classification. Now we have additional rules, and some rules have been changed. That means that the classification of the device, the class of the device, may change from the past directive to the new regulation. And this means that one important thing to be done to plan the migration from the previous directive to the new regulation is a reassessment of the classification. This classification assessment shall be conducted in accordance with Annex 8 of the regulation. Annex 8 is very clear because it provides the question you shall reply to determine the proper class of your device. Here I have highlighted in red one important thing that changes. It's related to the black bags that in the old directive were in class 2A. Now, according to this new rule, black bags are in class 2B. That's important. Why? Because the process for the conformity assessment by the notified bodies is linked to the class of the product. That means that black bags in class 2B will have higher level of requirement than devices in class 2A. That means that for manufacturer producing this kind of product, there are new requirements to implement. I mentioned you that the conformity assessment procedure is different for different classes. What is mean the conformity assessment procedure is the way, the process through which you get the authorization to put the CE mark on your product. Is the way where you get the CE certificate from the notified body when it is required. And it depends, as shown by this slide, on the class of the device. You see on the left part that for class 1 device, you just need to have demonstrated the fulfillment of the general safety and performance requirement according to Annex 1 of this regulation, and you need to have a technical documentation. Then the manufacturer shall issue in self-certification a declaration of conformity and can affix the CE mark on the labeling of the product. And I go to the other extreme on the right part of the slide. When you classify for you can see that for higher class of devices, such as class 2B or class 3, you need, first of all, the involvement of the notified body, and you need to demonstrate the compliance of your quality management system with the requirement of ISO 13485, and you need to demonstrate the compliance of the product with the requirement of this regulation. That means that ISO 13485 plus this regulation are the two pillars of the CE mark, are the two main requirements to be able to affix the CE mark. In this case, as I told you, you need the involvement of a notified body, which is an entity that has been accredited by the European competent authorities to assess the conformity, the compliance of the company and of the product, and they can release the certificate, and you will affix beside the CE mark a number which identifies the notified body. So any user can see which was the notified body that authorized you to put the CE mark, and it will be easy to see beside the CE mark on the labeling of the product. The parts of these processes that are highlighted with the red outline are processes that are described in the annexes of the regulation that foresee the product verification, the product test, the physical testing of the product by the notified body. But if you decided to go with the conformity assessment procedure described in Annex 9, you don't need to provide to the notified body any sample for the testing, because this will be enough for that. So it's the most demanding in terms of resources, but it's also the most simple process. I would like to tell you that if you go through the regulation, the annexes are very important. And the most important annex of the regulation is Annex 1, where there are listed the general safety and performance requirement for the product. This annex was also present in the previous directive and lists the specific requirement for the product. There are 10 more requirements than the previous directive, so it's very important to go through this list of requirements. Most of the requirements are related to the risk that this device can expose, to which the device exposes the patient. So what's important here is to have a very good risk management process in place, but this is something that my colleague will tell you more details. But this is something that has been enhanced by this regulation with respect to the previous directive. Then there are specific requirements related to the characteristic of the product. For instance, the presence in the product of certain substances that are in direct contact with the body or with the blood. For these substances, the limit in terms of volumes of pound is changed. That means that to be in compliance, to migrate to the new regulation is not sufficient to update the documentation, because there are devices that maybe they were okay with the new directive, but maybe they are not in compliance with this requirement. For instance, for the presence of carcinogenics or mutagenic substances. So since the limit is changed, maybe your device cannot be anyhow distributed. For instance, for this chemical risk, other requirement is related to the construction of devices. For instance, the device shall have a system in place to guarantee their compatibility with our devices in a room, ergonomic principle, etc. So it's important. This affects physical characteristics of the devices. This requirement shall be made, the compliance with this requirement shall be made evident in a very simple way. It's consisting in the preparation of a general safety and performance requirement checklist, a table, a matrix where you list all the requirements, the 23 requirements of the Annex 1, and for each of them you will indicate if this requirement is applicable to your product or not, which are the standards that you utilize to demonstrate the compliance, the method, and the reference to the document where you can find this evidence. This is very useful where when you submit your technical documentation to the notified body to apply for the CE mark, because this is a sort of table of content, of index of your technical documentation. So through this, it will be very easier for the reviewer of your technical file to check for the document where find the demonstration of conformity with this specific requirement. So this is a document which is needed if you prepare a technical documentation because you want to apply for the CE mark. This is important also for the legacy devices. I mean devices that were already CE marked in accordance with the old directive, and now you want to migrate you want to renew the certificate in accordance with this regulation. So you need to reassess the compliance of the device. The demonstration of compliance of the device is in the technical documentation. I told you in the article, talking about the article 10, one of the obligations of the manufacturer is to have a technical documentation. The technical documentation shall be in accordance with the Annex 2 and Annex 3 of the regulation. These two annexes are very detailed and provide you instruction, guidance, how to prepare the technical documentation. For instance, Annex 2 tell you that your technical documentation shall be based on 6 sections. You will have 6 chapters and tell you which information shall be put within each of the 6 sections of your technical file. In the first, the device description. In the second, all the information provided to the manufacturer, that means the labeling, the instruction for use, etc. In the section 3, the design and manufacturing information, what in US is called the design history file, and the device master file, device master record. Section 4 is exactly the general safety and performance checklist that I showed you before. In section 5, you will put your risk management file. And the last one, but the most important, is the verification and validation part of your product. So all the documents that you had to demonstrate the compliance of the product, for instance, the biocompatibility testing, the usability testing, the clinical evaluation, all this information will be part of the section 6 of your technical file. One of the most important, and the new one, as I mentioned, is the clinical evaluation. Here you can see the definition of clinical evaluation and the clinical investigation. Clinical evaluation is a wider part, a wider process, which includes clinical investigation. Clinical investigation means clinical trial. So the investigation which involves human subject. So what the clinical studies. While clinical evaluation may include clinical investigation, but also includes the collection, the gathering of clinical data coming from literature, for instance, or clinical data related to other devices. So one is part of the other. Clinical evaluation is applicable, the need of clinical evaluation is applicable to all classes of devices and is mandatory for all the products, while clinical investigation may not be conducted for class 1 and class 2A devices if the manufacturer already has sufficient clinical data collected in some other way to demonstrate safety and effectiveness of the product. The clinical evaluation is a process that is not only performed at the beginning before the CE mark of the product, but is a process that applies to the entire life cycle of the products. Clinical evaluation shall be kept up to date through a process which is called post-market clinical follow-up. That means the collection of clinical data after the marketing of the product. The last important requirement of the regulation is the post-market surveillance. As I told you, is the process through which you gather, you record, and you analyze the quality data related to the quality of the product gathered from the field, and you evaluate to verify the need of preventive and corrective actions. All these requirements are highlighted by the regulation, but are also confirmed by the requirement of the quality management system. For instance, this is also mentioned in the section 8 of the ISO 13485. It's mentioned in the section 10 of the regulation as an obligation of the manufacturer, and is mentioned in the Article 15, which lists the responsibility of the person responsible for the regulatory compliance. So it's a requirement that is very enhanced by the regulation. The process for post-market surveillance is consists of different steps, starting for the planning, the establishment, the documenting, etc., and it means the continuous update of the technical file of the product through the data that you collect from the field. This data, of course, consists of customer feedback, complaints, and the incidents that are reportable to the regulation. Concerning the vigilance is the process through which you report to the competent authorities the serious incident. I don't know how it's called in Mexico. Is it technovigilance? Is what is called technovigilance? So, of course, here you can see the definition of incident and serious incident. What I highlighted here is that also the user error is considered as an incident for the European regulation, and you can treat it as an incident. Concerning the serious incident, what is changed in the new regulation is the time frame for the reporting. That means that serious incident have to be reported not later than 15 days, while in the old directive we had a limit of 30 days. Now it is changed to 15 days. It's understood, it's confirmed that the incident leading to a threat for the public health shall be reported within 48 hours. So at 2 calendar days, and this is the stricter requirement in the world for serious incident reporting. But there is also something that is favorable, that is the fact that if you have a similar serious incident on the same device related to the same root cause, there is no need to report individually, but you can report just a summary, a periodic summary report. And this is something that facilitates. Who is responsible for these activities? Of course, is the person responsible for the regulatory requirements that, again, doesn't need to do it personally, but it needs to oversight this kind of process. Of course, the incident shall be recorded, will be recorded once it will be fully operative into the electronic database, which is UDAMED, and in all these documents, the UDI code of the product shall be reported to facilitate the traceability. Concerning final provisions, you know that the implementation date of the regulation has been postponed from 2020 to 2021 due to the COVID situation. But now it's fully operative. So the requirements related to the quality management system shall already be implemented. Then this article states that your certificate can be considered valid till May 2024 or till its natural expiry date, whichever is the first. and provided that there are no significant change. If you have significant changes to the product, you need in any way to renew the certificate according to this new regulation. So the last limit is, of course, May 2024. And what you shall do within this date, in order to be able to renew the certificates of your product, of course, perform a gap analysis of your quality management system, then we implement all the processes such as basic UDI, clinical evaluation, post-market surveillance, post-market clinical follow-up, etc. And you have to perform a gap analysis of your technical file and updating your technical file in accordance with the requirement of this regulation. And at the end, you will get the renewal of the CE mark. Of course, many people shall be involved, quality assurance, quality management system people, economic operators, who is responsible for the labeling, the research and development, the clinical team, the marketing team who can confirm the claims, etc., post-market surveillance, and regulatory affairs department. And these again are the same information that I gave you in the previous slide, because there are sort of action plan for the transition. That's all. And I'm sorry for I took some 1 minute more, but if you are question, I can reply to you. You are shocked and you have no question. Okay.
Could you share any experience you already have regarding the new trends in terms of technology and the new medical devices that we are coming in innovation and especially in the legal and engineer field? How do you interact with that field?
So first of all, one of the most important news in the trend is related to the software which can be considered medical devices, because in the past there were many, for instance, many software, I mean mobile applications that are used, for instance, to determine the proper dosage of a certain drugs, etc. That are mobile applications that are developed by pharmaceutical company to accompany the sale of their drugs. These with the new regulation, these are medical devices, and they are at least at class 2A. So if in the past they were distributed without any control, now they are subject to this regulation. And for the mobile application developers, this is something completely new, but this is important. I don't know if this is something. Is this what you meant? Another important thing is that all the companies renewed their certificate in order to postpone their expiry date and to postpone till May 2024. The obligation to migrate to the new regulation. That means that in 2024, in May 2024, all the certificates will expire in the same day, and the notified body will face a huge peak of work to do. Maybe they will not be in time replying to your application for the renewal of the certificate. And this will create some risk of business disruption for the company. So my personal advice in this case is to already book the slot for the review of your technical file and for the renewal of your certificate not later than tomorrow, so that you will be sure that your notified body will be able to reply to your submission in time and to not disrupt your business. And if you haven't done it, it's already late. Please book the slot for with your notified body, even if you are not 100% ready, but they will provide you a sort of appointment, and at that time you have to be ready.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa. Muy bien, la siguiente conferencia, un aplauso por favor.